Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how support for proportional representation has taken a small but solid step forward as a major union has potentially laid the groundwork to allow the Labour Party to adopt the policy formally for the future. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So it goes without saying, or at least it should, that our parliamentary arithmetic should reflect the votes cast in a general election. A Conservative Party winning 43% of the popular vote should not have over 50% of the seats and therefore 100% of the power to do what the majority actually voted against. Brexit being the most obvious example, over 50% of votes that were cast were given to parties whose official position was to back a second referendum with Remain as an option. And yet we didn't get that referendum because of our archaic, wholly undemocratic first past the post system. That's without complaining about the fact that it's not really democratic, it's not a democratic choice if one party lies about its policies. That changing the electoral system won't help that, one step at a time. But a few weeks ago, I talked about proportional representation again, didn't I? I talked about how a motion to support proportional representation was voted on at the Labour Party conference. It was overwhelmingly supported by the delegates there, the actual Labour members there. But the vote lost. Why? Because the unions, who control collectively 50% of the voting power of conference, voted it down. Only 5% of union votes supported it. So imagine my surprise last week. Unite, one of the largest unions in the country and a major voting bloc at Labour conference, I think it's the largest actually, had their own conference last week. And they voted to back opposing first past the post formally. You know, the same Unite union that voted down the motion in support of proportional representation just a few weeks earlier. Odd. And I confess to not knowing what the internal politics has been there. I'm not a member of Unite. I don't really know people who are to talk to. At first, I thought it must just be the Unite motion was just a vote against first past the post. So you could justify it. You could justify voting against a motion for proportional representation at the Labour conference, but in favour of abolishing first past the post, because there are alternatives, no pun intended. But after the Unite vote, their new General Secretary, Sharon Graham, said, quote, "Today, Unite Policy Conference voted to support proportional representation for the first time in our history." So it is odd. I wonder if it can be easily explained by noting that union leaders often don't mind first past the post, enhances their power, but ordinary members, whether Labour members or union members, are absolutely fed up with it now. And why wouldn't they be? First past the post means you have a realistic chance of two candidates in almost all scenarios. You know, like in my constituency, your choice is between Labour or the Conservative candidate, and that's fine for me as a Labour supporter. But if you're a Liberal Democrat or a Green, or even Monster Raving Loony Party, you're knackered. You spend your vote on those parties, you're throwing it away. Actually, that's a thought, Monster Raving Loony Party. I wonder if we had a full proportional representation system, which I don't imagine we will, but let's say we did, could we actually return a Monster Raving Loony Party MP? That would be a sight to behold. If we ever see such a day, we will know that what's left of the UK is back on the road to glory. I know that sounded glib. I'm actually quite serious. People should be able to vote for whichever party they think best represents them and not have that vote wasted. But back to that Unite vote. Now, it might be that I'm just looking for a cynical explanation. I often look for cynical explanations because mostly the explanations are quite cynical. But it might just be that Unite blocked the Labour motion because they had not adopted this policy at the time and they didn't want to be seen to preempt it. Internal politics can be a pain in the arse at times. At times, all the time. But that doesn't matter. It seems clear that Graham's statement doesn't sound to me like someone who has reluctantly accepted a vote that they really wish had gone the other way. This now makes things very exciting. Though with dangers, as I've discussed before and will summarise again here. The defeat of the PR motion at the Labour conference arguably sunk the issue for the foreseeable future. Sure, they could have brought it back again next year, but what would be the point? If the unions would just block vote against it again, it wouldn't go through. 80% of Labour delegates voted in favour of it. A number that might increase next year, but it was never going to increase to the point where it'd be over 95%, which is what it would need to be to have defeated that union vote against it. So it'd be all for nothing. If 95% of the union votes are going to go against it, no point in running the motion again next year. But the motion now surely will be run again next year. Now, I confess that I don't actually know how many votes exactly Unite get, but I think they are the biggest affiliate union in Labour. I think I'm right in saying that. That means they will have a large chunk of the votes. Would Unite voting in favour have swung the motion the other way? Without knowing exactly how many votes they get, I can't be certain, but I think it almost certainly would have done. And there's still the possibility for other unions to come around to this way of thinking as well. The bottom line is this. If there isn't a general election in 2022, and we don't know, it might well be that there is a general election next summer, and it might well be there is not. But let us say there isn't. Then that means there will be another Labour conference next autumn before the next general election. That conference will rerun this motion if it has a realistic chance of winning, and now it absolutely does. That means that in about 11 months from now, the Labour Party conference may well vote for the party to adopt proportional representation as formal policy. Now, there is danger as well as opportunity here. The way many supporters of PR will imagine this in their heads is that Labour adopts the policy, win a general election, and then bring in proportional representation. Easy, n'est-ce pas? In fact, if Labour adopt it as a manifesto promise and win an election, or form a coalition with other parties in favour of the move, then there doesn't even have to be a referendum, and we will never have to suffer another first past the post election again. But there are numerous flaws with the plan. The first, the biggest, is that the Conservatives, who are in power at the moment and control the public narrative, and the media, who always control the public narrative, will rage against it. They will argue that it is less democratic, that it is more expensive, that it means you won't have any local MPs in whole swathes of the country. All of these are false. Quite easy to point them all out as false, of course. But how to persuade people that they are false? Because we can't go around individually all the voters. Because let us be honest, let us face facts here. For over 10 years now, the Labour Party has not even been able to persuade the public that they would form a better government than the Conservatives. Even right now, consider that trying to persuade the public that this current Conservative government is reducing their quality of life, making the cost of living much higher, harming our environment, embarrassing us overseas. These should be relatively easy things to persuade the public of. If they can't even do that, what chance of persuading them of the danger posed by people they don't even know? Hannan, the Koch brothers, Bannon, and so on. What chance of persuading them that after the unpleasant upheaval of rewriting our constitution with Brexit, that we should engage on further rewriting of it with an unfamiliar electoral system that will be labelled as an EU import to a frightened xenophobic public? I've said before, there exists a serious danger that there will be voters who, under other circumstances, will go, look, I'm sick of the Conservatives, they've had all this time, they're not delivering, they're actually making things worse, I'm going to vote against the Conservatives. But then they'll go, the Conservatives are really bad, I think Labour would be better, or a Labour Lib Dem coalition would be better, whatever. I'm not sure about this scary new voting system, I think I'd better stick with the devil I know. And that's not a clinching argument, but if, it is one that PR proponents have to face up to. Like, if we have no plan to tackle this issue, if we're not going to face up to the reality of that issue, then it will derail the whole project. You may only get one shot at this in half a century. The second danger is that proportional representation is not just one thing. Like the Unite Union have now committed to exploring different options, because that's the thing. There are a lot of different options. If Labour do adopt such a policy and it goes in their manifesto, they need to have properly researched the different forms and need to settle on a detailed form that they can push onto the public. You know, they're going to be asked very detailed questions by a hostile media. They need to be able to come up with calming answers to them. That means that Labour need to properly commit, not just accept a vote from conference. But dangers aside, this is still a big step on the way. It completely changes the mood of a few weeks ago. PR is back on the agenda, and it could even garner more support for next year. The odds of this passing at next year's conference surely have now gone better than 50%. You know, as a result, supporters of PR, I would suggest, would do well to organise themselves and start coming up with coordinated proposals to flesh out the details sooner rather than later. Don't just get it adopted as formal policy and then leave it to others to sort out the details. That way lies disaster. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.